Hello everybody, I'm your host Hal Curtis and I'd like to welcome you to The Space Industry by satsearch, where we share stories about the companies taking us into orbit. In this podcast, we delve into the opinions and expertise of the people behind the commercial space organisations of today who could become the household names of tomorrow. Before we get started with the episode, remember you can find out more information about the suppliers, products and innovations that are mentioned in this discussion on the global marketplace for space at satsearch.com. Hello everyone and welcome to the Space Industry Podcast by satsearch. This is your host, Hal Curtis, and I'm joined today by Karthik, Head of Supply Chain at OpenCosmos. OpenCosmos is a very well-known brand in the industry, probably a name you're familiar with. The company offers end-to-end space mission management and services. And today we're going to be talking about the OpenCosmos' supply chain and supply chain management in the wider space industry. I'm sure if you listen to our podcast regularly, this is our bread and butter at satsearch. We've supported more than 400 mission teams across the world and over 10,000 different individual procurements and initiatives. And so it'll be great to get the perspective of an individual company like OpenCosmos, who does deal with a wide range of missions, has been operating for a number of years, and has to deal with the supply chain issues and opportunities that are facing the wider sector. And Karthik's ideally placed, I think, to give us these insights. So thank you very much for being here today, Karthik. Welcome to the Space Industry Podcast. And I wanted to ask if you could please set the scene for our listeners a little bit by giving a bit of an overview of your personal background and your current work at OpenCosmos.
Thanks, Howell. Thanks for that introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Karthik Mallikarjuna. You can call me Karthik. I am a mechanical engineer and also hold a master's degree in management. I currently work as head of supply chain at OpenCosmos, and I have been working with the company for the last 5 years.
Fantastic. Now, as I mentioned, you do a range of work at OpenCosmos, a range of very interesting work on some missions of different scales, different levels, and obviously have a number of projects, like any company your size, a number of projects on the go at different stages of maturity. So to delve into really the supply chain aspect of this work, I wondered if you could tell us what sort of technologies or services are currently causing the longest delays in your development timescale, which have the longest lead times, and maybe what sort of issues is this causing, or why do you think this is the case in the industry today?
Yeah, sure. OpenCosmos is an organization that takes care of the complete end-to-end satellite solution. This means we design, manufacture, launch, and operate the satellite once in orbit, and then extract this data and insights through our cloud-based platform, DataCosmos. So as we provide an end-to-end solution, our manufacturing processes are all done in-house. And because of this, we find that the longest lead times are optical payloads, solar panels, and propulsion systems. These are the common products that we find usually with the longest lead times in the industry.
Interesting. So some of the more complex subsystems that you are using and things that require specialist manufacturing, particularly the optics, and propulsion is always an issue regardless of the size of your vehicle, as we see from even Starliner. Yeah, interesting. I think we're seeing these issues crop up quite a lot across the industry, and there are companies trying to bring innovation to market to solve these problems, and there are others who are trying to fix things in a more fundamental way. It's hard to keep up with what the best options are for everything, but a lot of it also comes down to, as I'm sure, the actual performance of the suppliers, of individual suppliers, in terms of their delivery and their communication and all that sort of thing. I wondered how you think suppliers across the industry could maybe improve their approaches during the procurement process. Without naming names, maybe you could share some of the more frustrating examples of behaviors you've seen, or indeed of companies doing it right, doing things great, and you wish that everybody could behave like that.
Yeah, sure. Supply chain is a very critical element in the new space industry. And I think we need suppliers to focus more on strategic partnership offerings, such as better pricing, better lead times by maintaining some inventory of a few products, and overall better communication and adaptation to the technological roadmap of the customer and industry. And there are many suppliers who are doing it right in terms of product offering and what adds value to the downstream part of the business. Where suppliers could improve would be to become more responsive to new inquiries, especially given the very tight timelines we tend to operate under in the new space industry. So I think that's where we would like to see improvement.
Excellent. Yeah, it's interesting you use the term strategic partnership. I guess that's how you have to see things as a company who is making multiple purchases from your individual suppliers. You need that reliability. You need them to understand that they can scale with you as your missions and everything scales out. Yeah, very interesting there, and definitely agree with the recommendations on communication and on responsiveness and all of that sort of thing is something we deal with on a daily basis, and we're always trying to get suppliers to understand that tomorrow, like I say, back to the scalability thing, today's customer buying one unit is tomorrow's constellation operator buying 50 units.
Absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. With that in mind, which sort of products or services do you think are particularly limited or expensive at the moment, and you would like to see more innovation brought to market? Or maybe you are seeing that innovation brought to market, but it's just early stage?
I think it's the satellite launchers.
Okay.
Because it's no secret that there is a lack of satellite launches in this space sector right now. And while we know that launch is often the riskiest part of the mission, I think it would be really great to see some low-cost service offerings, especially in Europe, as that's really lacking at the moment.
Interesting. If I could just ask a quick follow-up on that. What is it that you, as at Open Cosmos, would want to see from a satellite launcher, apart from the cost? You mentioned the low cost. What are the key things that you need in order to make your whole service more reliable and more efficient and more high performance?
I think it's mainly going to be a higher focus on reduction in monopoly that exists right now in the industry. We want more players in the market so we can start comparing not just costs, but also timelines and the sort of orbits that we could deploy our satellites to. And when you have more options, you can just make your tenders and procurement processes more simple because you have more options and you get to choose from these options, which gives you and puts you in a better position in terms of delivery.
Okay, brilliant. Because the more options you have, the more options you can offer to your customers, and that is treating the space sector like a true market, which is where we want to move to. Like you say, the more players that there are involved, the better they have to be to win. And using the word monopoly is very interesting. In a previous podcast, we delved into the power of SpaceX in the launch segment and the amazing advantages this has brought to the industry, but also the challenges that people who actually want to fly things regularly for their customers can face because of this. Yeah, very interesting that's what you've highlighted there. I think we're seeing the supposed focus on building launch in Europe, and I think there are a lot of players there. I'd hopefully like to get some of these people on the podcast in the future. But from both the space port side of things, but the money being put into launch. And it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out as well as in the US, because you see companies taking steps forward and then steps backwards, and meanwhile transport emissions regularly launching with very few issues. And it's very interesting to hear in the market. Okay, thank you for sharing that with us. That's great. Finally, just to wrap up, so we've covered what I wanted to ask you about in terms of the Open Cosmos supply chain. And as you mentioned, most things are manufactured in-house. You have these specialist subsystems, which are always going to be tricky to acquire, particularly on a decent cost, and areas with more innovation in the market, lack of launch options, particularly in Europe, which I think everybody's talking about. So finally, I wanted to ask, what are you most excited about working on at Open Cosmos over the next few years? What's the big plans for the company in the near future?
Yeah, I think with 8 launches, us is now working through a pipeline of opportunities covering open orbit and open constellation missions across all its 4 entities, and that includes UK, Spain, Portugal, and Greece, where we generate high quality data and insights, which is again handled by our Data Cosmos platform. And this will in turn help to solve some of the world's biggest challenges, such as climate change, energy crisis, and also the use of natural resources.
Absolutely. So bringing it back to those terrestrial value, I think is vital for everybody and is an important part of the Open Cosmos story and the story of the space industry in general. So that's fantastic. Thank you. That's a great place to wrap up there, Karthik. I really appreciate you sharing these insights with us today. I think there's lots that suppliers can take away in terms of the recommendations for you, the transparency, the responsiveness, the lead times and cost are obviously key, but becoming more key, right? Because the more options you have, the more likely you are to pick those with the best lead times and best prices, assuming they can meet the performance requirements and assuming that they communicate well. As space becomes a real market, we see these market forces coming into play, and the pressures hopefully making everybody rise to another level. Yeah, it's great the work that you guys do in Open Cosmos. We'll share some links in the show notes to the company website and everything. And yeah, just wanted to say thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for sharing this information with us today.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for hosting me and having me on this podcast.
Great, thank you. And to all our listeners out there, thank you too for spending time with us today on the Space Industry Podcast. As I mentioned, we'll share with you some links to Open Cosmos. Do check the company out, check out what they're doing. Let us know as well if you have feedback on the insights and the information that we've covered today. It's always great to hear what people's views are in the space supply chain as we all help build this into a real true market, a real true industry that can bring us all to orbit in some form. So thank you very much, and please tune in next time to the next episode of the Space Industry Podcast by satsearch. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Space Industry by satsearch. I hope you enjoyed today's story about one of the companies taking us into orbit. We'll be back soon with more in-depth behind-the-scenes insights from private space businesses. In the meantime, you can go to satsearch.com for more information on the space industry today, or find us on social media if you have any questions or comments. To stay up to date, please subscribe to our weekly newsletter, and you can also get each podcast on demand on iTunes, Spotify, the Google Play Store, or whichever podcast service you typically use.